When I called my son to ask about his wedding date, my daughter-in-law, with a cold smile, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "We got married yesterday. Only special people were invited." In that instant, it felt like a bucket of ice water hit my heart. Special people. And I wasn't one of them. For 3 long years, I paid their rent, bought every piece of furniture, filled their fridge when they had nothing to eat. I gave them my old age, my late husband's savings, only to be repaid with 4 words that still keep me awake at night. That day, I finally understood. Some children don't love their mothers, they love their mother's money. And sometimes blind love is the cruelest chain of all. If you've ever been used by your own family, comment one. I want to see how many of us have felt this pain so together we can finally say, enough is enough. My name is Eleanor Walker, and I'm 71 years old. I live alone in a small house on the outskirts of Seattle, the home my late husband Raymond built with his own hands nearly 40 years ago. After he passed, I poured everything I had left, my savings, insurance money, and part of my pension, into helping my only son Michael start his own life. For the past 3 years, I've sent them $500 every month to cover rent. When they moved into their first apartment, I helped Sarah, my daughter-in-law, pick out every piece of furniture: the gray sofa, the oak dining table, the soft rug she said would make the room feel warm. Every time I looked at the two of them, I saw the reflection of myself and Raymond decades ago, young, poor, but full of dreams. I told myself if my son can't find a strong start, I'll be his foundation. I believed that love could fill the space money couldn't, and that sacrifice was the only way to keep family close. But I was wrong. That morning, the Seattle sky was gray as always. I was brewing coffee, phone in hand, about to call Michael and ask a simple question: "Sweetheart, when should I start preparing for the wedding?" I'd waited for this day for 3 years. Sarah once said they were planning a spring ceremony, and I'd been counting the days. In my closet hung a blush pink dress I'd bought the month before, $200, not cheap for a retiree. But I thought, it's my son's wedding, I should look my best. I even tucked away $1,000 in an envelope as a gift to help them start their new life. As I dialed Michael's number, the living room door opened. Sarah walked in unannounced, which was rare. She held her phone in one hand and wore a strange smile, a smile without warmth. "Hi, Mom," she said softly, her voice light as air, but her eyes cold as steel. "Were you calling Michael?" I nodded, my heart light, still thinking they had come to share good news. But Sarah set her purse down, sat on the gray sofa I had bought for them, crossed her legs and looked directly at me. "You don't need to ask anymore," she said. "We got married yesterday. Just a small ceremony. We only invited special people." Those last 4 words, special people, dropped like stones into my chest. I froze, phone still in hand, suddenly heavy as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. I looked at Sarah, then at Michael standing by the door, avoiding my eyes like a child caught lying. For a moment, time stopped. Every sound, the heater, the ticking clock, disappeared. Only those 4 words echoed in my head. Only special people. So I wasn't special to my own son. For 3 years, I had paid their rent, bought every piece of furniture in their apartment, filled their fridge when they had nothing to eat. I had eaten instant noodles instead of groceries just to make sure they were okay. And now, on the most important day of my son's life, I wasn't invited. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Was it just the two of you? No one else?" Sarah tilted her head slightly, her smile fading. "Oh, my parents came, my siblings, a few close friends. That's all. You understand, right? We just wanted something private." I understood, all too well. Private meant without me. That evening, I opened Facebook. The truth stared back at me, bright and merciless. It wasn't a small ceremony. It was a perfect wedding, a sparkling white gown, a garden filled with flowers, champagne glasses glittering in the light, and Sarah's radiant smile beside my son. Her parents hugged Michael, their families laughed together, and every photo glowed with joy. Everyone was there except me. I stared at those pictures for hours. Each time I zoomed in, my heart broke a little more. I saw the blush pink dress still hanging in my closet, the new shoes still in their box, and the envelope with 1,000 in my drawer, silent witnesses to my foolish faith. I had imagined the wedding as a moment of reunion, that I'd hug Sarah and say, "Welcome to the family," and Michael would smile and thank me for all I'd done. Instead, I'd been erased, not just from the ceremony, but from their lives. A week later, Sarah called me. Her voice trembled, no longer cold or confident. "Eleanor," she began, "the rent's due." The landlord's been calling. Did you forget to transfer the money this month? I said nothing. Memories flashed through my mind, running to the bank in the rain, canceling plans with friends to wire money, staying up late to balance every dollar so my son wouldn't have to worry. Then I took a deep breath and said slowly, Sarah, do you remember what you said on your wedding day about inviting only special people? Yes. Why, she asked. I only help special people. The silence on the other end was so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. Then she stammered, Eleanor, what are you saying? We're your family. Family doesn't treat each other that way, I replied, my voice calm even to my own surprise. Then I hung up. That night I sat in the living room, the same place where I'd once planned all my help for them, and cried. But those tears weren't of sorrow anymore. They were tears of awakening, of finally realizing that I had turned love into a burden and kindness into a noose. I grabbed a pen and began writing down every expense from the past 3 years. $18,000 for rent, $7, $200 for groceries, $3,000 for gifts, $800 for medical bills, $2,500 for a car loan, $1, $200 for furniture, and countless smaller things. Total $33, $400, nearly my late husband's entire savings. $33,400 for a mother's love that was never returned. I stared at the number and started to laugh, a bitter, cracked laugh, half pain, half relief. I realized I hadn't just lost money, I'd lost myself. I had been paying to exist in my son's life, afraid that if I stopped giving, I'd be forgotten. But tonight that ends. I closed the notebook, wiped my tears, and stood up. For the first time in years, I felt light. I brewed a cup of tea, opened the window, and let the cool Seattle air fill the quiet house. At 71, I have nothing left to lose except my self-respect. And I made a promise to myself. Starting tomorrow, I will live for me and no one else. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Soft light seeped through the curtains, landing on the dining table, the same spot where I'd sat counting numbers all night. The scribbled $33 and $400 was still there, blurred by dried tears. It had been a long time since I'd seen so clearly the true cost of love. I remembered something Raymond once told me back when we were young, Ellie. You've got a heart of gold, but don't let people melt it down into spare change. I had laughed then. Helping your children can't be wrong, I thought. But 30 years later, his words sounded more like prophecy than advice. I made myself a cup of coffee and added an extra spoon of sugar, not because I like it sweet, but because I needed something warm for my soul today. Then I turned on my computer and opened my bank account. There it was, under scheduled transfers, Michael and Sarah. Rent, $500 a month. My finger hovered over the cursor. For more than 3 years, I hadn't missed a single payment. Every month on the 3rd, the money left my account automatically. I took a deep breath and clicked cancel. A message popped up. Are you sure you want to stop this automatic transfer? I pressed yes. Just one click yet. My heart pounded as if I'd just broken free from invisible chains. A soft ding confirmed the cancellation. I sat there quietly. The house was silent, but the silence felt different, not the kind of loneliness I knew too well, but the space of newfound freedom. What I didn't know then was that this single decision would unleash a storm within hours. Around 10 a.m., the phone rang. It was Michael. Before every time his name appeared on the screen, I'd rush to answer, my heart fluttering with hope. But this time I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Hi, Mom. Hi, Michael. Sarah said you didn't send the rent this month. The landlord's been calling. I took a sip of coffee, my tone calm. That's right, I didn't. Silence. Then his voice hardened. What do you mean? We're struggling, Mom. You know, I haven't found a stable job yet. You're 35, Michael, I said softly. It's time to be stable for real. He sighed heavily. Then I heard Sarah's voice in the background. Let me talk to her. Her tone came through sweet but sharp as ice. Eleanor, you're still upset about the wedding, aren't you? I understand it was a mistake not to tell you, but you don't have to be so harsh. I'm not angry, Sarah, I said slowly. I'm just tired. I've done too much for people who don't value it. But you're a good person. You wouldn't let us lose our home. I was a good person, Sarah. Now I'm learning to be a wise one. I hung up before she could reply. That afternoon, Michael called again, then texted, then called once more. Each time I let the phone vibrate until it stopped. I didn't block them. I simply let silence speak for me. That night, I pulled out an old notebook and wrote on the first page times I said no to save myself. The handwriting was shaky, but the words looked beautiful. I knew this would be the first page of a new life. 3 days later, I went to the bank to confirm the cancellation in person. The branch manager, Mr. Ken, looked surprised. Mrs. Walker, are you sure you've been sending that payment for over 3 years? I'm sure, I said firmly. And I'd like to know how to make sure no one else can access my account. He nodded, his expression softening. I'll set up a new security lock for you. And if I may say so, Mrs. Walker, I'm glad you're finally looking out for yourself. His simple words caught me off guard. My throat tightened. A man who only knew me through numbers and transfers was the first person in years to congratulate me for stopping. On the way home, I stopped at the grocery store. Instead of buying food for the kids, I bought things for myself: a tin of Danish butter cookies, a bouquet of yellow tulips, and a coral-colored nail polish. Small things, but as I stood at the checkout, I felt weightless. That evening, I cooked myself a simple dinner pan, seared salmon, steamed greens, and a glass of red wine, something I hadn't bought in years because I was saving money for them. As the wine warmed my tongue, I realized freedom tasted a lot like good wine, a little bitter at first, but rich, sweet, and deeply awakening. In the days that followed, my phone became a battlefield. Messages from Michael, from Sarah, even from their friends, all circling one theme: you can't do this. One of Michael's old friends even texted Aunt Ellie. Sarah said, "You're not feeling well? Is everything okay?" I replied, "I'm fine. I've just learned the difference between love and being used." A week later, Michael showed up at my door. He still had the old key. I was watering my plants when I heard the door open. "I just want to talk, Mom," he said, voice soft, almost pleading. "Then talk," I replied, setting the watering can down. "You're overreacting. Sarah and I really need you. We think someone's been influencing you." "Influencing me," I laughed softly. "Michael, no one needs to tell me when I've been betrayed. That pain teaches itself. You don't understand you got married without me. So now live without me too." He froze. For a split second, guilt flickered in his eyes, then anger. He slammed his key on the table and walked out. When the door closed, I stood there in silence. Part of me wanted to cry. But another part, the stronger one, felt a deep, steady calm. Because for the first time, I had chosen myself over the fear of losing someone else. That night, I opened the drawer where I kept old records, receipts, money transfers, shopping lists, all tied to Michael and Sarah. I gathered them into a box, sealed it, and labeled it "What I gave and will never take back." Then I placed it in the attic. I didn't burn it. I didn't need to forget. I just needed to stop living inside it. Before bed, I sat in front of the mirror. The woman looking back had tired eyes, deeper wrinkles, but in her gaze there was something new, a quiet strength, a spark of dignity. I thought again of Raymond's words: sometimes to love the right way, you have to know when to stop. And now, after all these years, I've finally begun to stop so I can start loving myself. 3 days after I canceled the automatic transfers, rain fell hard over Seattle, thick, heavy, unrelenting, as if warning me that something dark was coming. I was in the living room reading a cup of tea, steaming beside me, when I heard a car stop outside. 3 doors slammed shut, then the sound of hurried footsteps on the stone walkway. When I looked through the window, my heart clenched. 3 people: Michael, Sarah, and a well-dressed man in a gray suit holding a briefcase. Before I could react, I heard the click of a key turning in the lock. They still had keys to my house. I stood up sharply. "Who gave you permission to walk into my home without knocking?" Michael avoided my gaze. Sarah smiled, that cold practice smile that always made my stomach twist. "Mom," she said softly, "we were worried. You've been acting strange, not answering calls, canceling transfers, cutting us off. We had no choice but to come check on you." "Check on me," I repeated, my voice trembling but clear. "Is that what you call it when you treat your mother like a stranger at her own son's wedding?" The man in the suit stepped forward, his tone smooth and rehearsed. "Mrs. Walker, I'm Dennis Fisher, the family's attorney. I'm here to help with a few legal concerns. Your son and daughter-in-law are worried about your mental well-being." I stared at him, my eyes cold. "I don't need a family attorney, because there's only one person left in this family: me." He smiled politely, the kind of smile used on difficult clients. "Mrs. Walker, they're within their rights to request a financial competency review. You've been canceling transactions, withdrawing communication, and showing signs of defensive behavior. They're concerned someone might be taking advantage of you." I understood immediately. They were building a story that I was unstable, manipulated, unfit to handle my own finances. You're standing in my house reading my files, telling me I'm not capable, while my son has lived off my money for 3 years. My voice rose. If anyone here needs guardianship, Mr. Fisher, it's Michael, not me. Sarah stepped closer, her tone syrupy, her face carefully soft. Eleanor, please don't get upset. We don't want conflict. We just want to help. You live alone. You forget things. You're too trusting. Too trusting. I cut her off. Locking eyes with her. You're right. I was too trusting. I trusted that my daughter in law would love me like her own mother. I trusted that my son would be grateful. But I've learned, Sarah. I've learned enough. Michael spoke up, his voice cracking between guilt and desperation. Mom, I'm sorry about the wedding. We were wrong, but you can't just cut us off. The rent, the car, the credit cards, they're all under your name. If you stop, we'll lose everything. You wouldn't do that to us. I clenched my fists. Oh, I would, Michael. I would if that's what it takes for you to finally grow up. Mr. Fisher laid a stack of papers on the table. Mrs. Walker, to avoid any complications, all you need to do is sign here. This is a temporary authorization allowing your son to assist in managing your finances until you feel more stable. I looked at the papers, then at him. I walked over, picked them up, and without reading a word, I threw them straight into the trash. The papers scattered like snowflakes. Sarah's jaw dropped. Michael's face turned red. I spoke slowly, every word cutting through the air like a knife. The only thing I'm signing today is an order for the three of you to leave my house. Silence. Only the ticking clock and the rain against the window filled the room. Mr. Fisher tried again, his voice tight but controlled. Mrs. Walker, I understand you're upset. But if you refuse to cooperate, your family can petition the court. A judge might decide you need a legal guardian. I laughed a dry, bitter laugh. Perfect. I live on my pension, manage my own bills, pay my taxes. If that's insanity, then maybe the whole world's gone mad. Sarah's composure finally cracked. Don't forget, Eleanor, she hissed. Everything you own will go to Michael one day. We're just protecting our future. I looked at her for a long time. Ah, so that's the truth? This isn't about concern, it's about inheritance. You just couldn't wait for me to die before taking your share. Michael stomped his foot. Mom, stop it. I'm your son. No, Michael, I said quietly but firmly. You were my son. Now you're just a stranger who lived off my kindness, and I finally stopped being kind. I pointed to the door. Get out of my house. Mr. Fisher gathered his papers, his polite mask slipping. This isn't over, Mrs. Walker. You may regret this when the courts get involved. Good, I said. At least in court, truth still stands taller than greed. Sarah burst into angry tears, not the tears of guilt, but of defeat. You'll regret this, Eleanor. You'll get sick one day, you'll be alone, and we won't be there. I straightened my back. My voice was calm. Sarah, I'm already alone, but this time it's by choice. Michael turned away and slammed the door. The sound echoed through the house, sharp, final. But instead of pain, I felt peace. I sat down and looked around the room. The gray sofa I'd once bought for them was mine again. Raymond's wedding photo still hung in its place. No one could touch those anymore. I poured another cup of tea, took a sip, and smiled. I knew the battle wasn't over. They'd be back in one form or another. But today I had won the most important fight of all, the fight to reclaim myself. That night I wrote in my journal, I've lost the son I once knew. But maybe, just maybe, I found the woman I used to be. As I set my pen down, I looked out the window. The rain still fell, but it no longer felt cold. Seattle hadn't changed. I had. After that confrontation, the house fell into a strange kind of silence. No more ringing phones, no more footsteps, just me alone, with the echoes of a storm. My heart still pounded fast, as if fear hadn't fully left the room. I knew this wasn't the end. Michael and Sarah weren't the type to give up easily. The next morning, I decided to do something I should have done long ago, protect myself. The bank was my first stop. Mr. Ken, the branch manager, recognized me right away. He stood from his desk smiling kindly, though there was a flicker of concern in his eyes. Good morning, Mrs. Walker. I heard you'd like to revoke all external access to your account. That's right, I said, and I want new security layers. No one, not even my son, should have access to my money or information. He nodded. Would you like me to delete all your old online access as well? All of it, I replied. I want a clean start. As he typed, I sat quietly looking out through the glass windows. Seattle was wrapped in his usual gray drizzle, but inside me, a small ray of sunlight began to break through. Mr. Ken handed me a stack of papers to sign. Mrs. Walker, he said gently, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I've seen this before. So many older clients give everything to their children until one day they realize they've been taken advantage of. You're one of the few brave enough to stop. His words made my eyes sting. My hand trembled as I signed, not from fear this time, but from freedom. That afternoon, I called Mr. Weber, the old attorney who had helped Raymond and me draft our wills years ago. His office still smelled of oak and paper, a comforting scent of something steady and unchanging. I told him everything, how Michael and Sarah had barged into my house, how they'd brought a lawyer, how they'd tried to make me sign away my rights. He listened without interrupting, then removed his glasses and said gravely, Mrs. Walker, this is more serious than you realize. What they attempted, that's financial elder abuse, and under federal law, it's a crime. The word crime echoed in my mind like the clash of metal on stone. We'll do two things, he continued. First, keep every piece of evidence, statements, messages, call logs, even notes about their visits. Second, I'll file for an emergency protective order. They won't be allowed within 100 meters of your home. I nodded. Thank you. I'm not afraid they'll hate me. I'm only afraid I'll feel sorry for them again. He smiled softly. Being afraid of weakness means you're finally strong enough to see it. The next day, I stopped by Summers Hardware, the same place I used to buy tools for Michael's apartment. The owner, Frank, greeted me warmly. Fixing something for your son again, Mrs. Walker? I shook my head. No, this time it's for me. I want to change every lock in my house. And whatever the best security system is, I'll take it. Frank looked surprised, but didn't ask questions. He called his son Ethan a polite young technician. Ethan walked around the house taking notes. I'll install 4 outdoor cameras, 2 indoors, and a motion-triggered alarm system that connects directly to the police. If anyone tries to break in, they'll be alerted instantly. Do it, I said. I just want to sleep without fear. That evening, as Ethan worked, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end was one I knew too well. Eleanor, don't hang up. It's Sarah. We need to talk like adults. I stayed silent. I know things got tense, she continued, her tone honeyed but heavy. But Michael's not doing well. He lost his job. We're struggling. If you keep this up, we don't know what we'll do. Sarah, I said softly, do you remember your wedding day? Of course. Why? That day you said you only invited special people. Funny, I guess now I'm special again. The line went quiet for a few seconds. Then she sighed. Eleanor, we made mistakes, but you can't just let your son suffer. I closed my eyes. I could feel years of guilt and burden slide off my shoulders. Sarah, I said, my voice steady. I used to care too much. But now I care enough not to let myself be disrespected anymore. Then I hung up. No shaking, no second thoughts. Just relief, like dropping a stone I'd carried for too long. By the time Ethan finished, night had fallen. He handed me a small remote and showed me how to check the cameras on my phone. Now you'll see who's at your door anytime, anywhere, he said. I smiled. A real peaceful smile. Thank you, Ethan. For the first time in years, I feel safe. When they left, I stood for a while, watching the tiny red lights blinking in the corners of the house, little eyes guarding me from the people I once called family. That night, I cooked myself a simple dinner, chicken soup, toasted bread, and a glass of white wine. For once, I didn't think of Michael or Sarah. I thought of me, the woman who had lost $3,400 in 3 years of her old age, but gained something priceless, self-respect. Later, there was a soft knock at the door. It was Eleanor Brooks, my elderly neighbor from down the street, petite, silver-haired, kind eyes behind her glasses. Hello, Mrs. Walker, she said. I heard there were some strangers at your house yesterday. I just wanted to make sure you're all right. I was touched. For years, I'd believed I was utterly alone, yet here was someone who cared simply because she was human. I invited her in and brewed 2 cups of tea. We talked for hours. When I told her everything, she squeezed my hand and said, I've been there. My daughter once drained me dry because I couldn't stop helping her. But one day I learned if love makes you afraid, it's not love anymore. Her words cut deep, sharp, and true. I nodded, eyes glistening. That night I wrote the final line in my journal. I once feared losing my child, but now I fear something else, losing myself again. I set the pen down and exhaled. At 71, I had finally learned my first real lesson about boundaries. And if you've ever had to pay the price for loving too much, if you've ever had to choose between kindness and peace, comment 1. I want to know how many of us have been hurt by those we love the most. And if you're living through it right now, please remember this. Sometimes real love begins the moment you dare to say enough. A week after I changed the locks and installed the cameras, I finally began to feel safe. Each morning, I brewed my coffee, sat by the window, and watched raindrops slide down the glass. For the first time in years, my home truly felt like mine. No more footsteps without warning, no more phone calls that made my heart tighten. But peace, as I was learning, never lasts long. That Monday morning, I was cleaning the kitchen when a knock came at the door. On the porch stood a young woman in a gray business suit, her badge gleaming with the words Department of Senior Services, Washington State. She smiled politely. Good morning, Mrs. Walker. My name is Nancy Schmidt, a social worker. We received a report that you may be showing signs of psychological distress and living in a potentially unsafe situation. I've been assigned to conduct a welfare check. I froze. Who filed that report? I'm not allowed to disclose that information, she said, still wearing her professional smile. But according to the statement you've recently shown concerning behavior, cutting off family contact, canceling financial transfers, installing excessive security measures, and refusing medical assistance, I didn't need her to say it. Michael and Sarah. I took a deep breath and forced calm into my voice. You can come in, but I'll be calling my attorney before we talk. Nancy hesitated, but I was already dialing. Within 20 minutes, Mr. Weber, my steadfast attorney, my only shield these days, arrived. He spotted the name badge on Nancy's chest and sighed. Adult Protective Services. The usual tactic. Then he turned to her, his tone steady but firm. Miss Schmidt, Mrs. Walker is my client. Unless you have a court order, you have no authority to conduct an investigation in her private home. Nancy's expression tightened. We're just responding to a welfare concern, sir. The report indicated she might be under undue influence from someone encouraging her to sever family ties. Mr. Weber cut in smoothly. Then you should know this Mrs. Walker has already filed a financial abuse complaint against that very family. We have documented evidence of unauthorized entry coercion and an attempted signature under duress. You're welcome to ask your questions, but I'll be recording the entire meeting. A faint flush rose on her cheeks. All right, she said quietly. We sat in the living room. Nancy opened her notebook and began asking questions in a careful, measured tone. Mrs. Walker, have you had any difficulty managing your finances? Recently, I have a fixed pension, I said evenly. All my bills are paid on time. Would you like to see the statements? I handed her a neatly printed stack of papers. Are you taking any medication? Only vitamins and aspirin. I have no chronic conditions. Do you feel isolated or lonely? I smiled faintly. I used to, back when my family controlled my wallet. But now I have good neighbors, new friends, a lawyer who protects me, and peace in my own mind. Nancy paused mid-sentence, lifting her eyes from the page. Something in her gaze shifted, doubt fading into quiet respect. Mr. Weber leaned forward. So tell me, Miss Schmidt, do you see a confused old woman being manipulated, or a clear-headed woman who knows her rights? Nancy hesitated, then nodded slowly. Honestly, I don't see any signs of impairment. I think this report may have been exaggerated. I met her eyes. Let me ask you something, Miss Schmidt. If someone tried to take your money and when you refused, they called you crazy, how would you feel? She lowered her head. I understand. I'll note in my file that you're fully competent and self-sufficient. After she left, I sank into my chair, my hands still trembling. Mr. Weber rested a hand on my shoulder. You did perfectly. But I'm afraid this isn't over. I know, I said quietly. I can feel it, they're not done yet. He nodded. You're right. They might petition the court to declare you financially incompetent. But don't worry. You have evidence, medical assessments, records, and me. That evening, I began preparing for battle. I backed up every video from my cameras to an external drive. I logged every call, every text, every time their car drove past my house. I called my insurance company and removed Michael as a beneficiary. I opened a new bank account at a different branch when no one knew existed. Each small act felt like adding another brick to the wall that would keep me safe. That night, I visited my neighbor, Eleanor Brooks, my new friend and quiet guardian. We sat in her cozy living room sipping cinnamon tea as rain whispered outside. When I told her about the wellness check, she sighed deeply. They're trying to break your spirit, she said. I lost everything once because I believed my daughter only wanted to help. People like that can't stand it when the person they controlled learns how to stand alone. I nodded. The difference is I stopped before they could take everything. She smiled, her eyes warm and wise. No, dear, the real difference is that now you've learned how to live again. I smiled back, though my chest tightened. Yes, I was living again, but only after part of me had already died. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I opened my new notebook and wrote the first line, day 45, since I said enough. They call me selfish, but really I'm saving the only person I ever abandoned, myself. I closed the notebook and looked toward the window. The streetlight cast my reflection on the wall, a thin, gray-haired woman, but with eyes that no longer trembled. I whispered to myself, if they try to paint me as unstable, I'll make sure the whole world sees how clear my mind truly is. And just as my gut had warned me, a few days later, the letter came. King County Court. Notice of petition. Michael Walker and Sarah Walker petition for a determination of Eleanor Walker's financial competency. I stared at the words, coal black final. The sting of betrayal rose again, but this time it met something fiercer fire. I set the paper on the table and let out a dry laugh. So this is it, I whispered. You want a war, then you'll have one with a mother who's done being afraid. The day I received the court summons, the wind outside was howling. March in Seattle is always cold, but that day, the chill seemed to seep right into my bones. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the sheet of paper printed in black ink, my name right beneath the words determination of legal capacity. It felt like being sentenced for a crime I never committed. I remember only one thought echoing in my mind. My son wants the court to declare me insane. Something inside my heart shattered, but no tears came. Maybe I had already cried too much. This time, all that was left was silence. The next morning, I went to Mr. Weber's office. He greeted me with a thoughtful look, a thick stack of documents on the desk before him. They've officially filed the petition, he said. The hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. I asked, what evidence do they have? Mr. Weber opened the file and pulled out a few pages. 3 statements. One from Sarah, one from your neighbor, Mr. Davis, and one from the pharmacist, Mr. Green. They claim you've been acting erratically, forgetting to pay bills, hoarding medication, and refusing medical checkups. A sharp pain struck my chest. They're making it up. Exactly, he said. And there's also a falsified psychiatric report from a so-called Dr. Lehman. They allege that you refused to cooperate, with the doctor taking that as proof of cognitive impairment. I sighed. They're clever. They know how to twist self-defense into a sign of madness. Mr. Weber looked at me with quiet determination. But we won't let them win. I've contacted Dr. Moore, one of the top forensic psychologists in the state. She'll conduct an official evaluation, and the results will go directly to the court. The appointment with Dr. Moore took place in a bright, simple but comforting room. She was about 50, calm in demeanor, with a voice soft as mist. Mrs. Walker, she said gently, I know this is difficult, but think of this as a chance to prove yourself. She asked me everything, my age, former occupation, income, savings, what I had done over the past week. Then the questions deepened. Have you ever gotten lost while going out? Do you remember recent events clearly? Do you understand why your son filed the petition? I answered each question slowly, clearly, without evasion. When the evaluation ended, Dr. Moore smiled. You're lucid, self-aware, and manage your finances better than many people your age. You don't need protection, you deserve respect. Those words almost made me cry. But I only smiled and said, thank you. That's what I've been waiting to hear for years. We spent the next 3 weeks preparing the counter evidence. Mr. Weber was meticulous: bank statements, transfer lists, spending receipts, my daily journals, even video footage from my security cameras showing Michael and Sarah entering the house uninvited. Everything you've endured now, it becomes proof, he said. I didn't reply. I just stared at the papers, the numbers, the lines of text, evidence of my love over the past 3 years. $33,400. Not a fortune to most, but to me was the price of my old age and my peace. On the day of the hearing, I wore a simple black suit, my hair neatly pinned back. It was cold, but I didn't wear a coat. I wanted to walk into that courtroom with my head held high, not trembling like the confused old woman they painted me to be. The King County Courthouse stood in downtown Seattle, an old red brick building with high ceilings and cold white light. As I walked through the grand doors, I saw Michael and Sarah already there. Michael wore a gray suit, tall as ever, but his eyes avoided mine. Sarah was different. She looked straight at me, her expression laced with defiance. Another man stood with them, tall, silver-haired, his face sharp and cold. Richard Price, a lawyer infamous for winning guardianship cases in favor of younger clients. The hearing began. Mr. Price opened with a polished speech. Your Honor, my clients, Michael Walker and his wife, seek only to protect an elderly mother whose cognitive health is in decline. They have no intention of exploiting her assets only to ensure her safety. I watched him speak, each word flowing as if he believed it. But I knew the scent of lies. It smells like money. Then Sarah took the stand. She wept as she described her mother-in-law's erratic behavior, her baseless suspicions, her withdrawal and isolation. She said I had been manipulated by others and could no longer regulate my emotions. I sat silently, letting each lie pierce my skin like needles. I didn't interrupt, didn't react. I had learned that silence can expose people better than anger ever could. Then came Michael's turn. His voice trembled, laced with false remorse. My mother's always been a good person, but lately she's been paranoid. She thinks everyone's after her money. I just want to help her stabilize her finances. I looked at my son, the boy I once held in my arms, taught right from wrong. I realized he was no longer that boy. His eyes held nothing now but calculation. When it was our turn, Mr. Weber stood, voice firm and clear. Your Honor, what we see here is not a mother losing her mind, it's a mother betrayed. For 3 years, Mrs. Eleanor Walker provided over $3,400 in financial support to her son and daughter-in-law for rent, living expenses, and health care. In return, they excluded her from their wedding, invaded her home, and now seek to control what little she has left. He presented the evidence, bank records, videos, messages. Then he called Dr. Moore to testify. Dr. Moore delivered her findings, her tone soft yet unwavering. Mrs. Walker is fully lucid with intact cognitive function. Her decision to end financial support was rational and voluntary. The courtroom fell silent. I saw Michael lower his head, his lips pressed tight. Sarah tried to hold her composure, but her eyes were glistening. When it was my turn to speak, Mr. Weber asked Mrs. Walker, would you tell the court why you chose to stop supporting your son? I took a deep breath and answered, because I realized that by continuing to give, I was losing the most precious thing I had, respect. I gave out of love, but they receive out of greed. And love, when it's exploited, is no longer love. It becomes servitude. No one spoke after that. Only the faint scratching of the court clerk's pen and the ticking of the clock on the wall. As I sat down, I felt my hands trembling. Not from fear, but from release. I didn't know what the verdict would be, but I knew I had reclaimed what mattered most, my voice. That day, as I left the courthouse, the Seattle wind blew fiercely again. Yellow leaves swirled around my feet, scattered across the old stone steps. I looked up at the gray sky and thought perhaps freedom sometimes means losing everything that once meant family. And I was ready for that. The 2 hours waiting in the deliberation room were the longest of my life. I sat still on the cold wooden bench, my hands clasped tightly together. Each minute felt like a grain of sand, slow, deliberate. Inside me, fear and hope blended into something trembling yet defiant. In front of me, Michael sat with his head down, staring at his phone. Sarah leaned back, her face, pale lips, pressed tight. Mr. Weber, on the other hand, remained calm and steady, as if he already knew victory was near. When the door to the deliberation room opened, the judge's footsteps echoed, measured, heavy, resolute. He walked to the bench, expression unreadable, a thick file in his hands. The court is back in session, Judge Miller said in a deep, resonant voice. After reviewing all files, testimonies, and evidence presented, I held my breath. The world fell silent. I could hear nothing but the rhythm of my own heartbeat. The court finds no indication that Mrs. Eleanor Walker suffers from cognitive decline or impaired financial judgment. Dr. Moore's report confirms that she is lucid, independent, and fully capable of managing her own affairs. I closed my eyes. A warm tear rolled down my cheek, not from sorrow, but from release. The judge paused for a few seconds, then continued. Furthermore, the evidence shows that this petition was financially motivated and driven by personal gain. The court hereby dismisses the guardianship request in its entirety and issues a warning to all involved parties to cease any further intimidation or interference in Mrs. Walker's private life. I heard Mr. Weber exhale a long breath he must have been holding for 2 hours. He turned to me with a small smile and whispered, "We did it, Eleanor." I didn't answer, just squeezed his hand. Mine was trembling, but it was the tremor of emotion of finally realizing that justice wasn't a luxury after all. The judge added, "Mrs. Walker, you have the right to request a permanent protection order against those who have willfully invaded your privacy and property. Should you need legal assistance, the court will provide free counsel for senior citizens." I stood and said calmly, "Thank you, Your Honor. All I want is to live the rest of my life in peace without fearing a knock from my own family." The courtroom fell silent. Sarah lowered her gaze, unable to look at me. Michael, on the other hand, glared, his eyes full of anger and confusion. He spoke softly, but I heard every word. "I don't understand how you could do this. You're tearing this family apart." I met his eyes and said, my voice quiet but sharp as a blade, "A family can't be torn apart if it never truly existed." Michael pressed his lips together and turned away. Sarah grabbed his hand, trying to pull him toward the exit, but before leaving, she turned back and murmured, "You may have won this time, but you'll regret it when you're old and alone." I replied softly, "Better to be alone in freedom than surrounded by people who only want to empty your pockets." Outside the courthouse, Seattle's sky was still gray, but faint rays of sunlight broke through the clouds. I stood on the steps, lifted my head, and breathed as if with a new pair of lungs, light, unburdened, alive. Mr. Weber stood beside me, briefcase in hand, his smile kind. "You should celebrate, Eleanor. You didn't just win this case, you reclaimed your life." I smiled. "Thank you, Weber, but every victory has its price." "What price?" he asked. "The price of losing the people you once believed loved you." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes losing an illusion is the first step to finding the truth." That afternoon, I went home, poured myself a glass of red wine, and played soft jazz. The saxophone filled the quiet air of the house, smooth and tender. On the table lay the court's written judgment. Under the lamp, the red seal gleamed like a medal. I ran my fingers over the paper and smiled faintly. I opened my journal and wrote Day 212, since I stopped being the family bank. Today, justice called me by my true name. No one can define me as the senile old mother anymore. I owe nothing to anyone, except to myself, a promise that from now on I will live for me. Late that night, as I was about to go to bed, the phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for a long moment, then declined the call. 2 minutes later, a message came. "Mom, I'm sorry. We were wrong. But can you give us another chance?" I read it but didn't reply. I wasn't angry anymore, just quietly sad. The kind of sadness you feel when standing before the ashes of a house that once burned down, knowing there's nothing left to save. I turned off the phone and opened the window. The night breeze drifted in cool and fresh, carrying the scent of rain and distant laughter from the neighbors. For the first time in years, I felt like I truly belonged to life again, not as a mother, but as a person whole and free. I looked up at the misty Seattle sky and whispered into the wind, "Robert, do you see I did it?" I imagined my husband, gone for many years, smiling somewhere out there. Maybe he was proud that at last I had dared to live for myself. That night I slept deeply. No dreams, no jolts awake. Only peace, the kind I had paid for with tears, money, and the loss of my only son. 3 months after the hearing, Seattle slipped into spring. The rain still fell, but it no longer felt heavy. The drops clung to the cherry branches by my porch like tiny shards of glass. Every morning when I drew the curtains, I felt a quiet gratitude, not because life had suddenly become easy, but because it was mine. In the first days after the victory, I lived in a strange state, free yet hollow. I'd grown used to spending every day worrying about someone sending money, answering calls, fixing other people's mistakes. With no one left to rescue, I didn't know what to do with myself. I remember once looking around the house, everything so quiet, and I burst into tears. Not out of sadness, but out of fear. Afraid this silence would swallow me whole. But day by day, I learned to fill it with myself. I started small. I fixed up the backyard garden, the one I'd let go wild because I was busy wiring money to Michael. I planted lavender, white daisies, a few rows of herbs. In the mornings when the sun first peeked out, I took my coffee into the garden, sat on the wooden chair, listened to the sparrows chatter, and breathed in the smell of damp earth. I felt my heart start to beat to the rhythm of peace. Then I went back to the old studio, the one my husband built for me before he died. The table still held the old brushes and a few tubes of paint hardened by the years. I dusted everything off and bought a new easel. The first piece I painted wasn't a landscape or a portrait. I painted myself a silver-haired woman sitting before a window opening onto a gray sky, a coffee cup in her hand, her eyes looking far away. I titled it Freedom's Morning. I hung it in the living room. Every time I passed by, it felt as though the eyes in the painting were looking back at me, asking softly, "Did you live for yourself today?" One day, Eleanor Brooks, my kind neighbor, knocked on my door. She carried a basket of fresh apple pie, the scent spilling through the kitchen. "Eleanor," she said, "we share a name, so we joke that she's little Eleanor and I'm big Eleanor. You need to get out more. Staying home all the time is a bore. I want to introduce you to my friends at the Garden and Grace Club." I laughed. "Sounds like the title of a romance movie." "That's about right," she said. "It's all women like you and me, some widowed, some divorced, some whose kids have stripped them bare. We share one thing in common: we all loved too much and lost ourselves." I agreed to go. That evening in the fellowship hall of the old church, I met those women: Maria, hair white as snow, but eyes blazing; Carmen, brown-skinned with a big ringing laugh; and Elfrida, 80 years old, slow-spoken, but every word sharp as a blade. We sat around a round table, drinking tea, eating pie, telling the kinds of stories no one used to want to hear, being treated like a walking bank by our children, being labeled senile just for daring to say no. I told my story, my voice shaky at first, but when I reached the part where the court declared Mrs. Eleanor Walker is fully lucid, the room burst into applause. Maria said, "You didn't just win in court, you won in yourself. Not everyone our age has the courage to save herself." I smiled, and for the first time in months, I truly meant it. From then on, my life found its color. Every week, I joined them for painting, gardening, and book club. I learned Italian cooking from Carmen and pottery from Elfrida. Once they dragged me on a short trip to Oregon where we watched the ocean and talked all night by the fire. I discovered that old age isn't what's frightening being alone in the wrong story is. I was no longer the mother betrayed by her son. I was a woman rewriting the final chapters of her life. One June morning, I received a handwritten letter, a pale yellow envelope, the slanted familiar script, Michael Walker. I held it for a long time. I thought I would shake or cry or rage, but I didn't. I felt only calm, the way you feel looking at an old scar. I opened it. Inside were just a few short lines. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. Sarah and I have split up. I'm trying to start over. I know you won't forgive me, but I just wanted to say, I miss you, Michael." I read it over and over. No detailed apology, no excuses, just 3 words: "I miss you." And strangely, I didn't feel hatred anymore. I placed the letter in the wooden box where I keep my husband's mementos, our wedding photo, his old watch, a few brittle letters he mailed me when he was in the service. I didn't write back, but in my heart I whispered, "My son, I miss you too." But missing isn't forgetting. Forgiving isn't returning. I knew that if I replied, Michael would try to stitch things back together and it would all begin again. And I cannot go back to being the gentle, compliant mother I once was. That summer, I sold the old house. The neighbors were surprised, but I knew I needed a clean start. That house had been a home, then a place of violation, then a battlefield. I wanted to leave that past behind so the first breath of 72 could be lighter. I bought a small condo near downtown, glass walls, looking out over Lake Union flooded with morning light. I chose furnishings in whites and pale blues, and I hung my own paintings. I set a small sign on the shelf. "This is the home of Eleanor Walker, neither a bank nor a nursing home, just a free woman living her life." On my first evening there, I opened a bottle of red put on Sinatra and stood on the balcony watching the city glitter. Below, traffic slid by and the streetlights pooled on the water. I drew a deep breath and felt my chest fill with new air. One morning, Mr. Weber called. "Eleanor, I just wanted to let you know the case is officially closed. Michael and Sarah no longer have grounds to appeal. All your assets and accounts are safe." "Thank you, Weber. You saved me more than you know." He chuckled. "No, you saved yourself. I just helped you hold the sword." We chatted a few minutes more. Before hanging up, he said, Eleanor, I don't think I've ever said this, but you're one of the strongest clients I've met. You reminded me why I chose this work. I laughed. And thanks to the lawsuit, I discovered the best lawyer is yourself if you're willing to stand up. Autumn came. The street outside burned red with leaves. I entered a local art show. No one could believe a 72-year-old woman could paint with such energy. Freedom's Morning was hung in a central spot and sold to a middle-aged woman for $1,500. She said, When I look into those eyes, I see myself. I've just escaped a toxic marriage. I smiled. Freedom is something we always pay for, but it's worth every penny. I used the money to throw a small party for Garden and Grace. We drank wine, laughed loud, and retold old stories, but no one cried anymore. Every now and then, I still hear about Michael through distant relatives. I'm told he moved to Portland, works for a small company, and is doing fairly well. No one mentions Sarah. I don't ask. Some chapters are best closed in silence. One evening, standing on the balcony, watching the crimson sunset shimmer across the lake, I realized something. I no longer felt angry. I no longer felt afraid. I felt grateful. Grateful that in the end, life forced me to lose everything so I could understand the worth of having myself. I pulled out my old notebook and opened to the first pages where I once wrote, I'm afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of losing my son. I'm afraid no one will need me. I added a line beneath it. It turns out only when I stopped being afraid did I truly begin to live. I closed the notebook and looked around my new home, where everything was chosen by me, where every wall tells my story. No other voice in my head, no more pleading phone calls, no more demanding eyes. Only me at peace with music playing softly. And for the first time, I understood something freedom isn't when we leave someone behind. Freedom is when we return to ourselves without feeling the need to ask anyone's permission. Winter came again. Seattle sank into mist and rain, but this year for me, winter wasn't cold. I had grown used to this slower rhythm of life. Morning coffee afternoons with a book. Evenings spent writing in my journal and painting. I no longer measured time by my worries, but by the small things that made me smile. One morning, I received a letter from the City Women's Council. Inside the envelope was a card. Dear Mrs. Eleanor Walker, we would like to invite you to speak at our upcoming forum, Women in Financial Autonomy, as your story has inspired so many. For a few seconds, I was speechless. Me, the woman once deceived by her own son, the one they called mentally unfit, now invited to be an inspiration. Life is strange. It can drag you to the bottom just to see if you'll dare climb your way back up. On the day of the forum, I chose to wear the navy coat my husband used to love and pinned on a silver flower brooch. When I stepped onto the stage, the warm lights shone down, revealing hundreds of women's faces, some gray-haired, some young, some quiet eyes glistening with tears. I began to speak not from notes and not hiding my emotions. 3 years ago, I thought happiness meant that my children still needed me. But I learned that some people need you only for your money. I lost $33 to $400, but worse, I lost myself. Until the day I understood love cannot exist without respect. The room fell silent. I looked around and saw eyes shimmering with emotion. One woman stood up, her voice trembling. If it were you, would you ever forgive them? I smiled and answered slowly. Forgiveness is for your own peace, not for their return. I forgave, but I didn't open the door again. Applause broke out, hesitant, at first then rising in waves. I felt tears fall down my cheeks, but they were tears of pride. After that talk, I received dozens of messages from women I'd never met. Some wrote, because of your story, I finally said no to my addicted son. I just closed the bank account my ex-husband kept using behind my back. Thank you. I'm 62 years old, and today is the first time I felt strong. I read every line, feeling both tenderness and warmth. I realized that pain isn't meant to be buried, it's meant to shine light for others. One evening, I sat on my balcony as the sunset painted the lake red. I brewed a cup of cinnamon tea, opened my old notebook, and wrote the final page. If I hadn't dared to stop, I might not be myself today. Sometimes to live right, you have to accept being hated, misunderstood, even alone. But that is the price of freedom. I am no longer the weak mother I once was. I am Eleanor Walker, the woman who chose herself. I closed the notebook and looked up. In the glass door, my reflection stared back. Silver hair, wrinkled skin, but eyes clear, bright, proud. A cold wind swept by, but I didn't shiver. because inside me, a fire was burning, the fire of someone who had fallen and risen again with her own hands. You know, some wounds never fully heal, but if you're brave enough, you can turn the scar into a mark of strength. If you're hearing this, maybe you too have been betrayed, used, or dismissed simply for being too kind. If you've ever been afraid to say no, afraid of being left behind, afraid of being alone, remember this: you have the right to choose yourself. Don't let anyone define your worth. Don't let your kindness become the knife that cuts your own heart. And if, like me, you've been hurt most deeply by those closest to you, then today, right now, take action for yourself. Stand up, cut off what hurts you, live the rest of your life for you and no one else. And if you truly mean it, click like on this video as a promise to yourself that from today on, I will never let anyone exploit my kindness again. Because only when you dare to choose yourself will life finally choose you.